This week, we're tackling a somewhat taboo topic, age. Young founders are valorized, but for everyone else, is it harder than ever to break into tech? How do you stay relevant when you're a decade plus into your career? I'm Helen, and this week we're joined by Ashley, Sally, Mac, and Angela, the whole crew. This podcast is brought to you by Mercury, the fintech used by over 200,000 companies to simplify their finances. We're huge Mercury fans here at Great Chat, and we use it to run this podcast. A few of us are also current customers for our funds and startups, not to mention the dozens of founders we've backed as VCs, angels, and scouts that run their businesses on Mercury. If you're launching a startup or fund, visit mercury.com to apply online in 10 minutes or less. The onboarding couldn't be more intuitive or delightful. Quick note, Mercury is a financial technology company, not a bank. For more details, check our show notes.
Hi, ladies.
Hello. Wow, we have like a full group for this week, which means that none of us are at Burning Man.
Oh yeah, happy Burning Man week to all who celebrate, which is no one here.
I'm very much enjoying the quiet streets of San Francisco. But this year, everyone has Starlink, so we're getting the play-by-play. And as you guys know, there's a massive desert storm. And so the build time is, it's chaos.
You guys, are we going to talk about how Burning Man is cursed? Like in the 2020s, we had like
that like swamp.
We had pandemic, then we had nothing, then we had nothing, then we had burning hot, man. I was there and it was 110 degrees during the day and like 80 at night.
What was the year where it was like
miserable
flooding? Wasn't
that
like
was last year?
That was last year.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
That was last year. And now we've got hurricane, man. Like, I'm sorry, this is insane.
Windstorm, man.
Global warming, man. They're gonna have to move it to like November or some shit. Like this is
global warming,
crazy.
man.
It's gonna move to an underground bunkers in New Zealand. That's gonna be the new celebration.
Oh, that hurts my soul.
Oh,
Remember, it started at Baker Beach in San Francisco.
I know.
Maybe they should move it back.
Can you imagine all of the people with like the Sea Cliff properties being like, get these hippies the fuck out of my backyard?
It's funny. I saw some posts about like how terrible, like there were all these headlines like, do not come. It's terrible. They're having to rebuild all the camps. And then there are like the staunch defenders in the replies being like, no, this is what Burning Man is about. It's about resilience. Like this is part of it. Like
The funny thing about that is all the CEOs are flying in their private jets. And then they're going through their hard labor to build.
I think someone else is building their camps would be my hunch.
Okay, but also low key, guys, if you've ever driven into Burning Man, flying is so nice. Like, I don't blame them for it. People are waiting like 15 hours to get in just like by the time they actually even make it out to bumfuck Nevada.
Mac, are you the only one of us who's been to Burning Man?
No, Sally's been.
I've been.
and
I was
Sally.
going to say,
Okay.
like, I doubt it. Statistically, 5 Bay Area girls, one of them has been to Burning Man, probably 3.
Like what inspired you to go?
I spent a lot of time making fun of my friends who went, and eventually they were like, shut the hell up, come with us and see how it goes. And I had a great time. I went twice. It was a good time. I don't think it's like not my personality, but I loved it. It was a good time.
The first time I went, I was leaving San Francisco and I was like, what's the most San Francisco thing you can do before you leave? And a month before Burning Man, someone gifted me a ticket and I went with one duffel bag, which clearly was not the prep mode that I needed to go into. But I survived.
I never went to Burning Man, but I did have like an anonymous Twitter account that was like a VC at Burning Man and was like tweeting from the playa.
Do people know this?
No, I'm like outing myself. I should have like, I tell you guys the handle, but I want to go back and look and see if the jokes are any good. But that was the extent of my Burning Man participation.
All of my closest friends are burners and they have, weeks and weeks of prep before they leave. And like I've helped out on so many projects and floats and then never ever wanted to go. So I feel like I'm this person that like had every opportunity to go every single year. I lived in San Francisco and never went. So I don't know if I'll ever go.
I have to say this is not exactly the same thing, but I went. I spent like 2 nights in the Gobi Desert. So like it's not the Nevada desert, but it was a very hot desert. And like my conclusion was I didn't really need to do that. Like I didn't enjoy like the heat and the sand.
I just love hydration. I like hydrated skin. I like
I feel like one of those terrible Burning Man people when I say this, but like, it's not really about like camping. Like most people there aren't for like, ooh, like I really just love the rustic lifestyle. I think it's more about like, hey, I want to go do something that feels like a cross between like a music festival and an art festival, and also I can make up for the fact that I have no personality beyond this. Like,
I will say like 10 years ago, it felt like Burning Man, and maybe this is just based on who was really promoting it, became such a tech thing. And it was like all the tech billionaires were there, and like the jokes were that like deals were getting done on the playa. Is it still a tech thing? Like, I'm just not seeing a lot of it in my feeds. Like, I don't know if it's relevant.
They started to get sponsors, and like, you know, there were like water sponsors, and like, you know, that really changes the vibe of most things.
Yeah. There's only one way to settle this, which is we have to go in person. So
I would hate to see Angela on the playa riding her bicycle across.
It's always like that person who like ends up having the best time and has like the most epic.
yeah, watch out, guys. When Great Chat goes to Burning Man, I'm gonna go crazy. So
Yeah.
We'll call our camp hydration camp for Helen.
Yeah, sounds good.
Everyone can come to get their moisturizer, and like it'll be
Oh
good.
my God, sponsored by Rode. That's the dream. Great Chat hydration camp sponsored by Rode. I'm manifesting it now.
Wait, Rode like the lip balm? Like the
Oh.
Road or Row? Because I only wanted to talk about Row as well.
Road, but
Road.
we can talk about
Good
Road.
segue. Good segue to Row.
Ro, which has huge marketing dollars apparently because it's on every one of my feed.
With Serena Williams?
I was defending Serena Williams so hard in like the group chat, in the comments, in the everywhere. I was like, you guys, she's like the greatest athlete of all time. She's not using GLP-1s. Okay. I was wrong. I admit it. I was wrong. She's out and proud using GLP-1s, greatest athlete of all time. They're for everybody, I guess.
Oh my gosh. They're all the receipts of Mac.
This is another example of like the bifurcation. Like on Twitter, I felt like Twitter was very celebratory, or at least my feed, which tends to be more like tech. And then people were furious on Instagram. I went and looked at the post that was like a combo from her and Ro, and people were so disappointed and so upset. And I'm sure she had all this priced in. I mean, no one does this and doesn't think about what are all the potential reactions. But I think that the overriding one I saw, and the one that I grapple with the most, because I think Serena has, you know, she should do whatever she wants with her own body, just like we all should. But like the impact on like young girls and young women who like have really looked up to her as an athlete and someone who's like broken a lot of barriers. And I think like the message to younger women around like weight loss is like a really tricky one to navigate. So that was the Instagram sentiment. And then on Twitter, it was just like, yeah.
Yeah, I think generally it's like people are separating her as an individual who should be total, you know, like she should make her own choices, and you know, nobody is criticizing that. But I think then, like, you know, when you're a celebrity, there's also all this pressure that, you know, everyone's watching you, and there are young women who looked up to you. And I think, yeah, I just commented, like, you know, I think she's like the world's greatest athlete, and there are a lot of young female athletes who, you know, are muscular and athletic, and, you know, they probably, I don't know how you would feel.
I went down a rabbit hole of looking at like the prior like weight loss medication crazes, and I don't think it's remotely fair to compare GLP-1s to like fen from like a health perspective. But it was really interesting to see that for prior sort of like eras of this, even for ones that were very mainstream, there weren't a lot of like celebrities that were openly talking about their use. And so this is like a big shift, because GLP-1s are kind of like an elite drug, not just because they're so expensive, but because, you know, Elon is using them, Serena is using, like, there are a lot of people who've talked about using GLP-1s. And we were talking about in the group chat, part of that is because these drugs, you know, have been proven safe for people using them for diabetes for quite some time. And there seem to be a whole host of other benefits. But also just like culturally, the macro, like we're in this like longevity sort of moment where people are trying a lot of different things to extend life and be healthier. And if you just look at the crazy antics of Brian Johnson, like taking GLP-1s doesn't seem like a big idea and could actually be seen as something that's like health promoting. And so it's interesting to see how like culture has shifted to meet this moment, to make it like okay or even admirable to be open about your use of like, a medication that is not new, but is new in this particular application.
Yeah, I agree with that. Also, we were having this similar conversation at dinner last night with a group of friends. And one of the things also is like people our age that are using GLP-1s are, we're more educated or done more research on the drug itself because, it was a diabetes drug that now has all these added benefits. But as a younger person who, sees this ad and sees, oh, there's no risk to it. But there's plenty of risks that are still yet to be determined, including, I think, one of the potential side effects is like dizziness or eyesight is one of them that have come up. And so, my friends who are on it are monitoring these things just to make sure. So I think in that, like, it's a little bit worrisome to me to see that someone like Serena is promoting it. And I think the other thing about it isn't Alexis Ohanian a investor in Ro? And that was not disclosed. I know that was some of the...
Listen, when we talk about value add, like he set a new bar.
Oh, he did.
How can I be helpful? Here is my famous spouse to promote your product.
I think overall, though, I read that eating disorders are down, like the prevalence of eating disorders. And I think that's a really good thing. Like I grew up dancing and like you're always in these like very small, leotards and things like that. And so everyone's very body conscious. And so like I grew up kind of around that culture. And I think that it's very different now. So
also the Gen Z, I think, are more healthier in their weight. I don't know if that's true or not, but like Addison Rae and you look at some of these artists, they're more healthier in size.
You see it like when you go to like collegiate sporting events, like, I always have this reaction whenever I like see college cheerleaders. I'm like, oh my gosh, like all body sizes represented and they're all just as talented. And it just like that wasn't the case.
That's what I was going to say. I didn't want to date myself as a millennial, but I was just thinking of that episode.
Pretty sure this is like so squarely the millennial cringe podcast.
Yes.
Go on.
Just Like That, which is, the Sex and the City spinoff. And there's that scene where Charlotte is very uncomfortable about how her body looks in this dress. And then she sees her younger colleagues who are, of different body sizes and openly wearing, different clothes. And so I was like, oh, I wonder how much of the discourse we're having is in millennial circles and how, I don't know if the Serena ad impacts Gen Z in the same way.
Oh, that's interesting.
Think about it.
So you guys saw the Midjourney Meta story. Any thoughts on that?
I went to a dinner last night and somebody was talking about how Midjourney is probably like one of their top most used AI apps. And I was like, for what?
Wow.
Tell me. Like,
what's
what do
their
you
job?
exactly? And they were basically describing that they create these like fantasy sort of like they use it to create content. She's a founder of a B2B company. And I was like, tell me everything. And so I thought that was a very creative and interesting use case, but it was just not one that I thought of. And so it was my first time where I was like, Midjourney for a B2B use case. Okay.
Midjourney is such a unique case. They're one of the ones that have never taken venture dollar or outside dollar.
Respect.
Yeah, and they're making a lot of money. So 2 years ago it was reported 200 million ARR. Now they're reportedly up to 5. They only have 150 employees. And it is still one of the most used image gen out there. And remember, it's also on like a pretty shitty UI with this like Discord. And I was talking to somebody about this and I was surprised. And it's just like creature of habit, even though it's not so intuitive to use on Discord. It's been around for a lot longer than a lot of these other image models. So I think an interesting added benefit of having Facebook and Meta, license is interesting because then you have all these applications like you can use through Instagram or other interfaces that are much more useful. I think the other unique thing about this deal was, I think it was Alex Conrad who reported and then Alex Wang tweeted right away, is that it's a licensing deal and Meta certainly has the war chest to purchase Midjourney if they wanted to. So I'm curious what the behind the scenes story about that was.
I mean, maybe they tried. I think a founder that refuses to take venture dollars might also refuse to sell. If you're like running your business the way you want to and you're making $500 million in revenue and like you're doing everything on your own terms, like I could have imagined this, like even just hearing the word licensing, because that's usually a component of like the hackquisitions, like it like makes me stressed out. But like in this case, they did like a straightforward license, and there's no CEO leaving to join Meta. So in my narrative inside my head, I have decided that the founder and CEO, David Holes, is that who it is? Like he was the one who was like, no, thank you. I refuse to be acquired or acqui-hired, and here's what you can have, Meta. So
did you put that scene together in Midjourney?
Yeah, right. Like I'm living for this fan.
Yeah, exactly.
Guys, welcome to my brain. It's the elaborate confrontation between Mark and David. But yeah, I love to see it.
I mean, the image space is, I mean, we talked about this like over and over. It's the models are getting so good that you with a naked eye could probably not be able to tell which model was being used today.
There are no more weird hands.
No more weird Will Smith spaghetti eating. Everything's now we can defy physics when it comes to image. But I think Meta has been pretty behind. They had their own image model a few years ago that I don't think people haven't been talking about. It's called Imagine. So we'll see. Maybe a good acquisition target.
Something that I've been noticing, like as I've been getting older in this career, is that and also even just earlier, like I worked at a company where our CEOs were under 25, and like that's like very famously part of the narrative. It's really interesting, especially like as I read more and more headlines, that it's getting harder and harder for young people, like even if they come from like a top 5 school out of like a really great CS program, to break into tech. And so something that's been like on my mind is it feels like the available window for tech is shrinking from like just for young people to like a smaller and smaller window. It almost feels like you've got like 10, 15 years where you're in very high demand in tech. And I just wanted to like chat about that with you guys, because we all come from like different tech backgrounds. We've all seen different eras of tech, different corners of it. But I think it's really interesting. And so I think maybe we can like start out with like, have you guys been hearing that it's harder for young people to break into tech? And like, what do you think is fueling that? Like, do you buy into this whole like AI is a better junior engineer than like an actual CS grad? Or do you think that there are other things that are fueling this?
I mean, I'm just going to challenge the notion that it's actually harder for people to break into tech. I think it's actually always been quite hard, maybe outside of a few like elite universities. I remember when I was at Social Capital, I was running marketing, but I also had like talent, and I would get these like beautiful resumes, like so much more impressive than mine was when I was applying for my first job. And like they had all the hot internships, they had all the sexy degrees, and they were like dying to get into tech. And I think what's different now, a couple things. One is tech is so much more of a like desired destination career-wise, right? When I graduated from school, I'll just go ahead and confess, in 2007, all of my peers were like trying to get into investment banking. That was sort of the default. And now I actually feel like getting into tech is the new default, the new sexy job. And so there's just so much more interest. And then you combine that with like the headlines around AI and how it's going to take people's jobs, and like vibe coding allows like one engineer to do what 10 used to. And so it feels like right now it's more of like a narrative than an actual change. Now in 5 years, that might be very different, but actually tech has always been kind of insular. Once you're in and you can maneuver around. But I think it's actually always been pretty hard to break into tech, and there's just like a different flavor of it today.
I'm a little bit in agreement there. Like I think the denominator is just getting larger, like, but I also think numerator is getting larger too. So I think, I'll take the sort of like slightly different example. I joined Facebook in 2008, where we had a lot of people who were STEM inclined, maybe graduated with a CS degree and went into investment banking or some sort of like quant, at a hedge fund, who were laid off through the recession, and like decided to solve a puzzle like on the Facebook careers site. And then I think there was this thing where like if you solved the puzzle correctly, like they would fly you out for an interview. So you had all these kids like, yeah, I have a, 1 or 2 year, severance package from Bear Stearns, and sure, I'll fly out to Palo Alto to maybe think of this job. And so like that was like a super interesting time because you had people who were sort of like, all right, yeah, I'll give tech. Tech wasn't a hot thing yet because I think we were still kind of recovering from the dot-com bust, right? And so you kind of had this like, reluctant sort of, I guess I'm in tech. I mean, I fell ass backwards into tech as well, right? I worked in advertising and sort of like segued into Facebook because they started focusing on brand ads. And so it was a crazy thing, Ashley, a similar story where when I was at Dropbox, we were hiring really quickly on my team. And the recruiter was just like, we never check the online sort of submissions, right? Like you apply online. Like we never check those, but let's just check just to see. And she pulled out, here's the summary and here are like the top 50 people. And I think like I really was stunned because, as somebody who went to like a Big Ten school and like, had a very non-traditional path into tech, I had all of these Ivy League graduates who did 2 years in investment banking or consulting at the top firms, basically writing me these like 4-page cover letters on why working on my enterprise marketing team at Dropbox is like their life's goal. And I was like, what? And so like, I think that's when like, we really saw this shift, probably similar to when you were at Social Capital, where it's like, oh, this is like the thing that the elite kids do, right? And now I bet it's more normal, right? There isn't that shock value. It's like you think about investment banking, consulting, and you think about working at a tech company. I guess my question is, how do we define breaking into tech? Like, would you consider getting an entry-level job at Cisco breaking into tech, right? Not to pick on Cisco, but it's like, is it just Mag 7 or super hot late stage AI company? Or, how do you define that?
To a certain degree, I think it's a little bit of like, it's like I think tech feels a little bit more democratic than almost any other industry. I don't know if that's true. I don't know other industries well enough to know if that's true, but like certainly like relative to finance, I think tech is pretty democratic. It's like, if you can get a foot in some type of door, then like all you have to do is go actually prove that you're valuable. Like when people ask about like, how do you get a job in venture? I'm like, there's a trillion different paths. Like you're going to have to find your own way, which is such an annoying fucking answer, but it's so true. Because it's not one of those things. Like if you are doing finance, like there's a very clear path for how you get into private equity. And it's kind of about like, can you execute and do you make consistently good bets? With tech, like, yeah, you can take like a clearly defined path, but most like you can also come in crazy ways.
I think the question is like, do you get the brand or the network that like gets you to your next job, right? Like either you get that company logo that makes someone take a look at your resume, or you meet enough interesting people that you can network your way to your next job. So like, I guess
and you don't even have to be like you don't even have to be in the Bay Area, although that helps. Like you can also go get Twitter famous. Like there's a trillion different ways to make it happen, but none of them are easy.
Yeah, and I think it's also how you like tell your story about it. So like let's take that Cisco job example.
Sorry, Cisco.
Is like if you want to be as close to the product or close to the AI part of the business, and then you network your way, like you said, Ashley, into a job that is a stepping stone. But if you just go into Cisco just for the hell of like joining Cisco, or let's insert another company in the similar space, then like you have to be very intentional about which group you join within that, and knowing that that's going to be your way of saying, hey, this is my exposure into AI, especially if you come from banking with like very little or no tech exposure. Something like I had to somewhat do as someone who didn't have tech exposure. I had media and journalism exposure. And so you have to be intentional about which groups you're kind of navigating knowing that it's a stepping stone for where you want to go next.
Switching gears a little bit, what about the people who have been at Cisco for their entire career? I know it's Cisco, again, like she said,
actually,
switch it. Yeah.
Cisco's becoming more relevant now because they're like doing AI infrastructure stuff.
Plus,
so I'm just
there's
put in like
there's a real
good word
shortage
for
of
Cisco.
network engineers. Like this is a real problem. So actually go study network engineering and go work at these companies.
Also, Cisco has longevity that most Valley companies could fucking dream of. Like
That's true.
I'm not actually shading it. In my defense, I did count it as a tech job. Low bar. But Switching gears a little bit, I think like the other half of this equation, and one that like sparked this conversation, because we talk about how hard it is to break into tech all the time. Like there's nothing revolutionary about that. Although I do think like it's interesting to like really critically examine that. The other half of this is like, I have worked at no companies where the CEO was more than 15 years older than me.
The only company I've worked at that where the CEO is older than me was Facebook, and Zuck is exactly like 5 weeks older than me. So like literally that's the only one.
The same age as Erin at Box and the same age as Emily at Glossier, and then Chamath is older than me. So that was my one foray into a more senior leader.
I mean, he looks so fit.
But I mean, I think the other half of this.
We're keeping that in, Helen.
Yeah.
Sorry. Go ahead, Mac.
But I think the other half of this is what does when everybody in leadership is older than you are, and like I'm sure some people have experienced the like conversation that happens when you see someone who's like really experienced and like, to be frank, older apply for a position. And a lot of the conversation ends up being, do they really want to do this role? Like what
Can they grind? Are they hungry? Yeah.
What does like long-term success, like what does career longevity look like in tech, especially if you don't end up as like the CEO, if that's not your dream or goal or desire?
I would say, yeah, I've been a hiring manager, across all of my roles, and had pretty large teams and had like pretty reasonable, like sort of age diversity. And there are some roles where I really do value experience and, sort of like the lived experience of having done that specific thing across multiple companies. And so I'm sure that is true of many functions within a large tech company. The question is, when it's a small tech company, right? Like how much is that true? Because I can see it working. I saw it, firsthand at like 1,000, 2,000 plus employees. But like when it's just 20 or 50, right? It's like, I think that it's like a pool where every drop in the pool, right? When it's small, it sort of impacts culture and like, there's more surface area. And so that's the kind of, I'm curious about that.
Well, and a lot of people who have like risen in their careers, especially if they've gone from like IC to managing managers, might think they want to join an early startup, and they actually don't, because it's like very unsexy when you like have to do everything yourself. And I've seen founders make this mistake time and time again. They hire a VP into like their first, they want a marketing leader who can like grow with the company, and they hire someone who's just been like away from the work for so long. So a big part of it is self-awareness, right? Like, do you want to both be like setting the strategy and then like executing all parts of it? And I think a lot of it is just like, coming in with that understanding. And then when I was at Box, I was there from 50 people through, I want to say like 1,500. And so saw a lot of like leaders come in who brought like real enterprise experience and, had worked at like Salesforce and some of the bigger names at that time. And there was a real distinction between the people who came in with their playbooks and held really tight to them, or were like, this is the way we do things, this is the way I've done it. And those who were able to like both like bring that expertise, but then also adapt to like Box's unique way of doing things, and like both teach and learn from the young people who had like sort of like figured things out on their own. And so it is a really like challenging thing. I think when it works, it's like the best possible environment where you have these people who bring all this really rich experience, and then you have these young people who almost like benefit from naivete because they're just like looking at things with fresh eyes.
And I'm sure that's specifically the case around like marketing, given like I have no experience in marketing. But like there's all these like new tools that come out, and if you are the one person who's the first marketing hire at an early stage startup, and you have to, figure out all the new tools, like get your strategy in place, like your social or whatever. I think Helen, I'm curious, like as a like multi-year veteran, it's really hard to adapt to that role.
Well, yeah, I mean, generally, I think that startups are more set up to succeed when they hire like a super smart generalist as a first marketing hire, right? And sort of delay that sort of senior leader until there are many things to manage, if that makes sense. But yeah, I agree. I think now there's more pressure than ever for these senior leaders to also they themselves be a Swiss Army knife, right? And that's very different from, I think, the culture we grew up in, because even at a Facebook or a Dropbox where I joined, it was like 500 employees, there was a sort of a culture of management, if that makes sense. That's how you move up in the organization. You take on more responsibility and you scale through people. And so I think it's different now. Yeah.
I thought you were going to talk about specialist versus generalist. Because I remember when I was applying for college, like it was like a ding against me that I was such a general, like I wasn't like brilliant at one thing. I just had like good grades and was well-rounded. And I think that was such a trend for a while.
On Twitter, I feel like every 4 years we get a new president and then we switch on whether it's better to be a generalist or a specialist. And right now we are in the generalist era, and who knows when.
Yeah, we are in the generalist. Let's celebrate millennials who were forced.
I think generalist era is also fueled by the fact that we all now have like a research assistant in our phone.
Right.
So there's also that.
That's right. Agents.
We're all just specialists in everything. But Helen, what you said was actually really interesting. I mean, we've talked about the social contract that companies have with employees. And I think back to your question, I think there's just a growing pains, right? Most of these tech companies, like this is the first generation or cohort of employees that are getting to the 40, 50 age. And so the question is, if you are entering this age and you're joining a company, is your expectation that you will also make, the generational wealth that, that initial cohort of Google employees did, or are you okay being an individual contributor? And so I think there's this question of like, what are the roles that exist and what are your expectations and how do you align both? Because to a certain extent, I think it's probably self-selecting, which is you get to a point in your career where you're like, well, I don't see my path to generational wealth. What am I doing here? Like, I'm 45, 50, whatever the age is. And there's probably a new social contract that needs to be made, which is like, what does a career path look like if you are not part of that founding cohort?
I think that hits on what I was really trying to get at, Angela, like this concept of like, first I came in, I crushed it as an IC, then I crushed it as like a manager, then I like went and started my own company and now I'm a VC, like the like classic hero arc of the Valley. But outside of that, when you start being like, okay, like I have kids at home, I'm not trying to go be a founder, although Godspeed, like people who are, it doesn't have to stop you. It would probably stop me. It doesn't have to stop you though. But when you go and you look at, okay, what does actually like continuing to do this specific grind look like? And to your point of this, like being potentially like one of the first full cohorts, and I mean, to some degree, that's not really true, right? Like IBM and like there's a few other, like even like the
Cisco,
Google, yeah, Cisco. But those were fundamentally different companies in a lot of ways because of both their longevity. Like when you think about, a bunch of people in fintech, for example, came up in like Credit Karma, very much still a company that's crushing it. But like Credit Karma actually like randomly spawned a bunch of really, really strong ICs who then went on to go start their companies or go take on meaningful positions elsewhere. But like its specific position in fintech has changed significantly. So if you had just stayed there, it probably would be a very different experience than like if you stayed at IBM for like 2-3 decades, it was the same company. I just think it's interesting to think like what sorts of narratives should we start talking about? Who should we start looking at? What sort of examples exist out there that are really interesting? Like the way that tech sees itself as like this, this absolutely like heroic young person's game where you like come in and you make the change you want to see in the world and you're super mission driven and like you go disrupt. Like I think having space in there also for like, what is the person who has a ton of experience, who knows exactly like what could go in and create a bunch of efficiency in other spaces. And those narratives, I think like just could be interesting to see like how do these change over time as we become a more mature industry.
All right, guys, let's head over to our question for this week. I just got a job offer from a startup I'm really excited about, but it is not in a hot category. How should I think about that?
So like maybe not AI.
Not an AI startup. We don't have any other details, but
all companies are AI companies, actually.
Exactly.
True, Mac.
Yeah, done.
We solved it for you. You're hot. Don't worry about it.
I don't know. Like I feel like how do you define a hot hot category right now? Maybe the thing that is not trending, or the thing where you don't see a bunch of emerging funds creating like single theses around, or like the area, like YC didn't do a call for startups, right? A call for founders to start companies in this category. I don't know. That's hard. I think not to just say like, I guess the position I would take is like, you want to be around like where the smartest people, most ambitious people are building in tech. And, you know, I think to the extent that being in a hot category is what is attracting all of that founder talent, operator talent, you know, engineering talent, I think that is just net positive for your career, right? Like I've worked all sorts of different categories. I never was like, oh, and now I want to start the fintech chapter of my life. It's like, I got recruited. Fintech was super hot. You know, a bunch of smart people I used to work with in a different category are working there. I don't know.
I agree. I think like follow the smartest people you possibly can. The other thing that you have to remember in tech is like every single, like speaking of relevance, the way that we were earlier, most of the companies that are alive right now are going to be dead in 3 years. Most of the companies that even are alive right now and will be alive in 3 years will have a very different position in terms of relevancy.
Right. So it's who you were around.
Flows.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of fucking Cisco, let's all go buy Cisco stock, because like Cisco and NVIDIA.
I mean, guys, Cisco is going to be our season 3 sponsor. I'm manifesting it now.
Oh my God. We could only be so lucky.
Both my
Cisco,
parents worked for many decades at Cisco. So.
Are you serious? Angela, you're just dropping this on us now?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. I'm Team Cisco all the way.
Amazing.
So
Amazing.
This is really a Cisco fan podcast.
Exactly.
I interned at Cisco when I was in college. So.
She just helped us for the end. All right.
Just the mic drop at the end. But my only contribution to the question is I also think there's a distinction between what your goal is. If your goal is relevance, you should totally follow the smartest people. If your goal is to maximize financial wealth, it's also totally fine to be like a big fish in a small pond that no one cares about. So you should also just be clear about what your objectives are.
And I really do think it comes down to what your goals are. And even when I look in our like Fund One portfolio, some of the hottest companies have been ones that are like marketplaces or like businesses that are not like at their sort of like peak of, or categories that are not at the peak of relevance, but like the business had a real reason to exist, and that founder has been able to attract great people. But anyways, good luck to you on your decision, and maybe we wrap and we'll see you guys next week.
Long Cisco.
Woo!
Thank you for listening to Great Chat. Have questions for us? Make sure to submit them at anothergreatchat.com. See you next week.
Thank you.